Good afternoon and welcome to the final session of Innovation Week 2020. This session is called What's the Score? Score a successful first step in your innovation journey. Today I'll be joined by David Keeley, who's a Senior Executive in Enterprise Ireland, Breda O'Toole, who's Head of Product Development and Transformation in IDA Ireland, Paul Killeen, who's the Senior Standards Development Officer, Research and Innovation in the National Standards Authority of Ireland, and Sean McNulty, who's the founder and chairman of Dolmen Design and Innovation. So some of you know, my name is Breda O'Brien, and I've been seconded from the Department of Business into the Department of Public Expenditure Reform to lead the innovation team. We've been working on a number of different initiatives to deepen an innovation culture in the public service, including the Innovation Fund, Innovation Week, of course, the Innovation Network, many other initiatives. And before we get started into today's session, I want to acknowledge all of the massive effort from my own team in DEPR, in particular Vinnie Lanigan, who's seconded from the Defence Forces, Catherine Matters, who's seconded from Wexford Library, Anne Broders from Enterprise Ireland, Dean Reid from the Department of Justice, and our other colleagues from throughout Public Expenditure and Reform for the mammoth effort this week for Innovation Week in particular. We've managed to engage over 4,000 people with Innovation Week activities, and that's not even counting the events that have been organised by public service bodies themselves. So again, thanks to my team for their enormous and fantastic efforts. So let's get started. So I'm delighted to first up introduce David Keeley. I've been working with David for the last number of months on this really interesting project about developing an innovation scorecard for the public service. David joined Enterprise Ireland in 2018 after spending almost 20 years working in the manufacturing and product design industry. David is a chartered engineer with background in mechanical, mechatronic and software engineering. He has spent most of his career working in senior R&D and innovation management roles. In Enterprise Ireland, David works as an innovation specialist, working on the development and implementation of an innovation strategy for Enterprise Ireland and its clients. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Breda. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about our project, the outputs we've generated, and the fantastic experience we've had along the way collaborating with IDA Ireland and the Public Service Innovation team, and with other public service colleagues along the way. This project was funded through the Public Service Innovation Fund and was a joint application by Enterprise Ireland and IDA Ireland. The objective was to develop a digital innovation tool to help organisations assess where they currently are, identify gaps in their innovation approach, and be signposted to where they can go to get support. And thankfully, we were successful in our application, and we were awarded €50,000 to develop the tool set. But I think the success of our application was due in no small part to the fantastic supporting video that was generated by our internal grad and intern innovation network. And we'll play the video for you now. It does a much better job of explaining the project than I could. If we could play the video, please.
At Enterprise Ireland, we are passionate about growing Irish industry sustainably through innovation. For our clients to succeed, they need a strong and innovative public sector supporting them and their employees. That includes us too. Our vision is to be an innovation leader in the public sector that supports and inspires our clients and our public sector partners to reach for innovation excellence. We want to develop a digital tool for Irish industry and the entire public sector that will help them assess their innovation capability, understand the route to success, learn from each other and collaborate. The output of this would be a digital innovation assessment tool that is aligned with the international best practice. And would be free to use by the entire public sector. The digital platform would allow for rapid deployment around the public sector. Organisations in the public sector could easily generate effective insights and monitor trends, with the end result moving the dial more rapidly towards innovation across the public sector and closer alignment with industry.
Great. Next slide, please. Thank you. I find it amazing that members of our grad and intern team were able to generate that video over the course of a couple of days on freeware. And I recommend anybody who might be going for a future public sector innovation fund use that type of resource as well. Our project comprised 3 deliverables, with the version of each being created for Deeper, IDA Ireland and Enterprise Ireland. Each version will be tailored for the user needs of each organisation. The first deliverable was a very simple assessment tool for organisations that were taking their very first steps into innovation. It's based around the broad innovation principles rather than the innovation capabilities framework in the ISO 56000 series. Second deliverable is a more detailed innovation scorecard tool designed for the majority of the user base, where organisations have some experience with innovation but are ready to take their next steps. This tool is more closely aligned with the innovation management elements and organisation capabilities. The last deliverable is an analysis tool to help Deeper, IDA Ireland and Enterprise Ireland derive insights from the data collected from their own user base. The purpose of this is to help continuously drive more effective policy, strategy and planning. For the remainder of this presentation, I'll focus on the second of these deliverables, the innovation scorecard. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what is the scorecard? Well, simply put, it's an online questionnaire that is used to automatically generate a personalized, comprehensive PDF report for you to use. The questionnaire is mostly multiple choice, is available online and can be used on a desktop or a mobile device. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to complete and uses plain, meaningful language that's, in this case, orientated towards the public service. The questions are aligned with ISO 56000 series. In the case of the scorecard, specifically with the key elements of the innovation management system. You'll receive a fully personalised PDF report automatically after finishing the questionnaire. You'll see some images from the sample report on subsequent slides. The tool is primarily aimed at organisational leaders and innovation leads. However, it can be used and accessed by anyone. In our case, we've used the EI version to get viewpoints from throughout client organisations in order to establish an overall average score and identify variances that might exist. The next slide, please. The report you see will look like this. It's 14 pages long and is fully personalised based on your responses through the questionnaire. The report is automatically generated using RPA technology, and you'll receive it via email within 10 minutes of completing the questionnaire. Next slide, please. The report also contains some context as an introduction to the tool and the ISO innovation framework, which is the house diagram that you'll see towards the bottom of this page. The language that's used in this version has been, again, orientated towards the public service. Next slide, please. One of the most important pages that you'll come across at the start of the report is a summary page that introduces the innovation maturity model that we've established, your overall maturity score, and a really useful heat map diagram that will help you quickly identify areas of strengths and weaknesses in the context of the framework. In all our testing, we found that this diagram was by far the most powerful piece for users, and that's across enterprise and the public service alike. We think it's really effective, and we're really looking forward to hearing what you think about it when you start using it. Next slide, please. The rest of the report is made up of deeper dives into each of the areas of the innovation framework. You'll be able to see the answer that you recorded on your questionnaire and a customised action to consider based on your answer and your score. Potential support resources are also provided as well as a record of your additional comments in a particular area. Next slide, please. In terms of testing, we've been conducting testing across all the organisations, but I'm going to speak to the results of the testing that we had with the Ireland clients. We've been testing an iteration of the scorecard with our clients for months. We've been using a rapid prototyping approach to this, so we've been able to test various iterations and improve. And as I said, we've been working with IDA Ireland and the Public Service Innovation team to do the same. And in fact, some of you attending this call may have participated in some of the testing that we did, and your feedback was very, very useful in refining the tool as we went forward. But speaking from our own experience, we've had fantastic feedback from EI clients, as you can see here now. I know that there's been similar feedback from the other versions, and perhaps Breda might be able to speak to that later on. Can we go to the next slide, please? And here's some of the feedback we've seen from IDI Ireland clients, and I'm sure Breda O'Toole, who's on the panel, can speak to this later on during the discussion. But broadly speaking, the feedback from their clients has been just as positive as the feedback we've received from Enterprise Ireland clients. And if we go to the last slide, please. So in terms of how the scorecard can help, I've laid out a number of points there on the presentation, but I mean, we really find that the top point there is a really powerful one. It's a really good tool to help start a meaningful conversation about innovation. You know, and that's been really useful for us with our clients. And I think my colleagues in the Public Service Innovation team will say the same thing. But you can see there's a number of other benefits there. You know, it's a good way to highlight your strengths and weaknesses. It helps identify differences in opinions in your organisation. It signposts you to useful support resources. Helps you understand where you are in your innovation journey and the areas that you should be targeting on to move the dial. And it's an effective way to establish your current innovation position as part of any kind of strategic exercise. And importantly, it provides a common structure and a common language for us to use around the public service and beyond when we're talking about innovation management and innovation capabilities. And that is it, Breda. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Thanks, David. So before we move on, I might just say to the audience, if you have any comments or questions, just pop them into our chat function, and Vinny from the team will join us later to pose those questions to the panel. I should say as well, David, that your project is one out of 52 projects that have been funded through the Public Service Innovation Fund since its establishment in 2019, in May 2019, the first call of which was heavily oversubscribed 14 times, and luckily we were able to double the budget then for the 2020 call. So 52 projects to date have been funded, and we're delighted to say projects from all sectors of public service have managed to be successful under this highly competitive fund. We will be launching the next round of funding early in 2021. So visit ops2020.gov.ie/innovation, where you'll see the Innovation Hub and any news about the next funding call. So David, we have been meeting almost weekly about this, and it is a passion project. It's great to see it finally coming together. And of course, congratulations on your Innovation Fund award. So what was your motivation to develop such a tool?
I'm just like anybody else, and a lot of people in this call. I like to solve problems, and this was a problem that we had identified for our clients, and actually the IDA Ireland had identified independently for their clients. So it was a good opportunity to come up with a solution that worked for both of us, but also a good opportunity to come up with one that would work for my colleagues in the public service as well. Like a lot of organisations, we've been looking at how we could become more innovative, and the whole Ops 2020 drive around also come into our thinking on that as well. So we thought that we could build an even better solution by collaborating together, and this was a good opportunity to do that. At an organisational level, so an Enterprise Ireland level, this project really speaks to two of our core values, and those are that we help shape the future, and perhaps even more importantly, we do the right thing. And this project was absolutely the right thing to do. It also links directly with actions right across the three pillars of our innovation strategy. So for us, it was a kind of no-brainer from that point of view. And then with the main drivers and the main motivations behind this project.
Thanks. I see this project as a perfect precursor for some work that my colleagues in DEPA are doing in terms of developing an innovation strategy. My colleague Philip McGrath leading on that, an innovation strategy and toolkit for the public service to enable public servants to develop their own innovation strategies. So I would imagine some of the audience are wondering, so who in the organisation should be filling this out? Who should be tackling this?
Well, you know, I said in the presentation there that we're really targeting this towards leaders, innovation, and senior managers within client organisations. But But in other use cases, we haven't limited to just those people. You know, we've had use case scenarios, and the tool is very flexible to allow us to do this, where we've really put the assessment tool out to people right through the organisation as a way to look at different perspectives and different viewpoints, from traversing right across the organisational hierarchy and right across the functions. And that's actually given us some really interesting results. So the flexibility is in the tool to really that anybody could use it, and it's really up to each of the three organisations about how they want to target particular elements within organisations and how they want to scale it up.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess what I've seen in terms of public service is that maybe innovation within their organizations is managed in different ways, whether it be in strategic HR, maybe there's a dedicated innovation team. We have a network of over 130 innovation reps from across the public service. So it could be that person, or maybe it's somebody in IT. So obviously innovation is not limited to IT, but sometimes the function is there. Okay, next up, I might just introduce Breda O'Toole. Breda, as I said, is Head of Product Development and Transformation in IDA Ireland. So we have two Bredas on the panel, just so it can be very confusing for the last session. A native of Connemara, Breda joined the IDA 17 years ago after spending much of her career in the UK. She has worked as IDA's Head of HR Regional Business Development, and most recently heads up a team supporting the growth of approximately 300 small to medium-sized multinational companies in the IDA portfolio, supporting their transformation journeys. Breda's team also works on the development of new product offers for clients of IDA, and particularly for those clients who need to reinvest in their business through innovative approaches in their product service offerings in order to remain competitive. And I suppose, Breda, just straight up, I'm interested to know, so this was a collaborative project, and can you tell us about your involvement in the project and why IDA wanted to be involved?
So thank you very much, Breda, and hello everyone. Lovely to be with you this afternoon. So, you know, IDA has about 1,500 clients in its portfolio. Some of the names you'll know very well, and then a lot you may not know, which is about 1,000 of them that are small to medium in size here in Ireland. The portfolio, I guess, spends about 2.2 billion in R&D in the sites in Ireland, and they outsource about another 1.4 billion in R&D. So it's a huge impact on the economy of Ireland, which is, of course, one of IDA's remits in terms of trying to drive economic development through foreign direct investment. Why this is very important is because it tends to be a lot of the larger companies that have huge resources for R&D and to drive the activity in R&D who are involved in research and development. But the smaller companies, very much like Enterprise Ireland's SMEs, are maybe not as involved in that activity. They might tinker a bit with some product development and put a lot of effort into responding to their client needs with products and services they deliver. But they really don't have an innovative mindset or sometimes a capability to move towards R&D in its real sense. So what we saw in this project was an ability to do a few things. One, as David very, very nicely put it, in fact, and I'm repeating him now, so I'm glad he went first, is really about starting a conversation and an engagement with a broad number of our clients around the area of innovation. And shape the conversation, the dial around how they manage their Irish sites. The purpose of doing this is to try and attract more activity in R&D and I from the corporate or the parent company that own them in the States or Europe or Asia Pac. So in trying to attract that activity to Ireland, it's really important to make sure that the companies stay here and sustain employment, which is, of course, what our remit is. And of course, this whole idea of transformation is also a really important link with innovation. So my team develop a lot of new product offers for our small to medium-sized clients as part of IDA's portfolio. And this innovation agenda has been a really, really valuable addition to that product offer that we hopefully will have through this assessment tool for our client companies. And that's on the one hand, and it meets a lot of the strategy around transformation from IDA. And on the other hand, we're going to use it in IDA itself, the public sector assessment tool within IDA itself. I mean, the words practice what you preach. So I'm extremely motivated by the outcome, and so were our clients. And those we piloted with, 12, 13, 14 of them came back, and I'm really excited about its use, and felt that the output, as David showed you on that slide, the reports that they can get would be a fabulous tool to influence their corporate to invest more in their Irish education, and that for us would be key.
Thanks, Breda. And as my boss, Dr. Lucy Fallon-Byrne, always says, innovation doesn't happen on its own. We have to create an environment and manage it and cultivate it. So I absolutely agree. And interestingly, the collaboration between DEFRA, IDA, Ireland and EI was interesting in terms of the testing. I think maybe lots of people would view the public service, as one entity, but actually, where maybe the civil service is quite homogenous, but it's very discrete and different in large parts of the public service. So Capital Matters tested the scorecard with a number of different innovation reps from across our public service, and the feedback was interesting, and tailoring it in terms of the needs and the language and the accessibility of the particular, whether it's public service organisations or IDA clients or indeed Indigenous enterprise in Enterprise Ireland. So I might move on to our next guest. So next up is Paul Killeen. Nice to welcome Paul. Paul is the Senior Standards Development Officer for Research and Development in the National Standards Authority of Ireland. Paul is a chartered engineer. With two engineers, I think, on this today, with many years' experience working across various leading industry and academic organisations in Ireland. He's worked in a variety of technical and business leadership roles in areas including advanced manufacturing, research, innovation management, enterprise and standards development. In his current role in NSEI, Paul encourages and facilitates leading Irish academic, industry and public sector experts to engage and influence international standards development. You're very welcome, Paul. Maybe you can tell us a bit more. I know David referenced it in his opening and on the slides, but the scorecard is built on this new suite of innovation management standards. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how that works? Thanks.
Thanks, Breda, and good to hear from David and Breda before me, and welcome everybody. So as David said, it's great to see the scorecard, which is a great example. I'd say probably world-class example. We looked at Sweden as well, have done something similar, but I think they haven't put it online like David and Breda and yourselves have done, which is that's a fantastic example of using standards as a platform for innovation. And some people think they're opposites, but they aren't. Standards can help serve as a foundation for innovating on top of. And basically, I suppose, to give a bit of a context of the credibility that might go behind something that's built on the ISO 56000 series, I'll just give you a bit of an overview of how it was developed. So over the last number of years, I think there was like 65 countries involved from around the world, hundreds of experts, and liaison organizations linked in as well, which would include the OECD, World Trade Organization, the UN, the World Bank, WIPO, which is the World IP Intellectual Property Organization, etc., and many others. So a huge amount of experts and relevant organizations involved and actively using it and supporting it as a series of standards. And then the process by which it's developed is open process, and it's an open invite today here to anybody on the call who's interested in getting in standards development, including this series, because it's not finished. As I'll say in a couple of minutes or a minute, there's a couple being published, about 4 have been published, and now there's a few more under development. So there's plenty of room for people to get engaged in either these innovation management standards, or if you're interested in emerging technologies like AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, or whatever, talk to me through either directly or through Breda. But I suppose the process is open, it's consensus based. So basically, you've got a consensus of all those experts saying, this is what good looks like in terms of innovation management. And then they came up initially with a series of principles 8 principles. I won't talk to them here, but I have a set of reference slides I can send to Breda, and she can post for anybody who's interested. But principles like realizing value, a systems approach, importance of culture and what you can do about it, managing uncertainty, etc. So that's a kind of, I suppose, an overview. And then at a national level, we've got our own experts that feed in then to the ISO system through the working groups. And we've a great chair, Sean, who'll be talking in a minute, from McNulty. And then we've got a lot of experts, over 30 actually involved, a number from the public sector, from the agencies. So David there, who spoke earlier, is an active member, as is a number of his colleagues, Declan Black and Joe Doyle on the IP side. IDA, we've got Leo Clancy, who's a colleague of Breda's, and we've many others across, education, industry, academia, etc. So that's kind of an overview, I suppose, of how the process or the system was developed. Then what came out of it? At the moment, we've got an overarching framework standard, management system guidance standard called the Innovation Management System, which basically helps you understand how do you set up a system for systematically managing innovation, going from ideas as an input right through to delivering products and services as an output, going through identifying opportunities, concepts and validation of concepts, and then development and deployment through project management type approaches. So, and then there's specific supporting standards underneath that, some of which David alluded to in his presentation. Idea management is another, goes into more detail around that fuzzy front end of innovation, which Sean is a real expert in. Intellectual property management goes into obviously more detail. Joe Doyle from Edwards Arms is very involved in that over the last couple of years. Concepts and vocabulary, so the lingo of innovation can put people off, whereas this is trying to demystify and it's not rocket science. This anybody can learn it and do it. And strategic intelligence management is another standard that's under development. And innovation partnerships was all about how do you do good collaborations to help you innovate, in terms of open innovation in this kind of complex world, and nobody can do everything themselves. And then the current series of those standards that I mentioned, the 56,000 series, they're all guidance standards. So you don't get certified against them. It's for yourself as an organization to learn and to try and deploy them yourself as best you can. And there is talk at the moment potentially of getting a certifiable standard, innovation management system standard, which would be 56001. And there's pros and cons of that, but that's currently out for voting, and our National Mirror Committee with Sean and team will be talking about that. But basically, that'll have requirements, and then I suppose some, let's say for Breda there, from Breda, from IDA, Breda I'll call her, maybe some of the HQ people would like to see that their Irish organization is certified to that, or customers might want to see it. So certification and kind of requirements-based standards have their place, but we'll see what happens on that one. And then I just finish on finally, as this platform, as I said, a great example is the Innovation Scorecard, which is a type of maturity assessment, taking the best of Sweden and other places, but adding the Irish twist. I think it's a fantastic example. We also then worked with SkillNet Ireland to develop an innovation excellence program through the Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet, but it's not for ICT people only, it's a generic program. So anybody's interested in learning about systematic innovation management, that is a good program to go on, innovation excellence program through SkillNet. And then, of course, we're going to need a lot of innovation projects delivered through a systematic innovation system to deliver on the big transformations like digital transformation and the new emerging technologies and the green sustainability transformation. So this innovation management system series of standards will help any organization deliver consistently, hopefully good outcomes in terms of innovation management and get a good return on their investment of time. Then the EU are a big believer and a supporter of this, as is the OECD, as I mentioned. And as I mentioned, there's an open invite there to anybody who's interested. You can contact myself or through Breda. So I think that's about it. Breda, I'll pass over to you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Paul. And I wondered, the extent of the work that happens out in the NSAI. You've lots of fingers and lots of pies. There's metrology, certification, standards development, and obviously not just innovation standards. And you can see the full suite of what they have there online if you go into nsai.ie. Thanks, Paul, for that.
Thanks, Ray.
And last but certainly not least, welcome to Sean McNulty. Sean is the founder and chairman of Dolmen Design and Innovation. Sean is a design-driven innovation practitioner and leads a team of practitioners who identify unmet and unarticulated user needs, then discovers and develops solutions, hypotheses, right through to market ready. He's a past president of the Institute of Designers in Ireland and chair of the NSAI Innovation Committee, and a national expert in ISO 56000 Innovation Management System. So welcome, Sean. Can you tell us a bit more about your role as chair of the committee that developed these standards?
My role as chair is very much around, I suppose in a way, my motivation behind being the chair in the first place is I meet loads of people in companies, because we work partner companies with loads of ideas, but they have no way to bring them to either senior management, or maybe the frustration of not able to bring them into reality. And that's really where I got involved many, many years ago on becoming the chair of the committee around innovation management, the MER committee as well. And one of key things was around that we had a powerful framework, and that's what the ISO gives us now, the 56,000 series. It's a powerful framework, and it's a global footprint. That's really important. So it's not just in Ireland, but in France, in South America, you will have the same framework and the same structures around how to do and how to deliver innovation, and the same terminology and the same kind of framework as it breaks down into different elements as well. And that is what I find very, very exciting about this, because as David said, and Breda, it allows us to actually bring change into a company. We have now a structure, a framework, a system by which anybody with a good idea, and you were mentioning it earlier, anybody can create, who wants to create a better outcome, has now got a process and a structure by which to do it. And that's really what drives us in our role as the committee, and also to make sure that Ireland is at the table in driving this change, and also being involved in the kind of the global decisions that have been made around innovation and how it is actually applied. It's quite key, because everything we do in Ireland is exported primarily, and it would be key very much to the economy and how we do things, and also how we survive as an economy, Breda.
Thanks, Sean. Just to preempt some questions that might come in from the audience who might have never thought about standards and innovation together. One, they're strange bedfellows, some might think. One is new, creative, disruptive, and the other is about conforming to a prescribed set of rules. What's your view on that? What's your take?
Yeah. I must say, Breda, I'm exactly the same as you. When I heard there was going to be an innovation standard, I nearly pulled my hair out. Well, it's gone anyway, and I must have pulled my hair out. And so, but we did deliberately, and that's why we're at the table globally at these discussions in Sweden and France and in South America and Argentina. We had an Irish team at the table. And we work through every word to make sure that it's a guide, it's a high-level reference. It doesn't prescribe what you have to do minute by minute, but it keeps that essence of creativity, open mindset, because the one thing for me I've learned about innovation over the years is it's all about people. It's empowering people to change things from the inside out, and it's also giving people the tools and the simple processes on how to do it. And again, it's creating that framework, that structure in which then people now are empowered to do things. It's an ISO, which means it's legitimacy with senior management. And also, as Paul was saying there, we've now got it adopted by the OECD. So any future Horizon 2020 funding for the next framework, it all has to be aligned with a process that's now proven and has a global footprint. So And yes, it's a contradiction in terms, but it's a good one in terms of it does empower people at the end of the day within any kind of organization.
Thanks, Sean. And I think this will really appeal to public service leaders out there that are tuning in. You know, traditionally very risk averse, and reason to be. A mistake is made, and you're maybe on the front page of the newspaper or pulled in front of the pack. So I think a method and a guide, a high-level guide to manage that newness and the processes that have never been done before, I'm sure will be incredibly welcomed. So I might just open the floor now to some more general questions, and let's take a deeper dive looking at the scorecard and the areas that are covered within the scorecard, the high-level themes. One of them is leadership and planning. And I suppose I just wanted to open up a discussion about leadership and planning and how important leadership is and planning is for innovation. How do you plan for the unknown if you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know what the outcome will be? How does the management standards and this scorecard help in that regard? And how can it help public service leaders in managing and leading on their innovation portfolio? I don't know who wants to come in there.
Well, if I can respond first, and you mentioned it, Breda, already, it is about mitigating the risks. In innovation, we have loads of unknowns and uncertainties, and there is within that actually a step-by-step in which we actually go through and we identify what are the unknowns so they become known, and we reduce the uncertainties. So it gives us very solid structure for the leadership to manage that kind of process and also give people the space. You need space to explore and challenge some of the conventional thinking. You take that safe space to do that within as well. So it is a framework. It's a framework, and that's the key thing here as well. And a structure, a disciplined structure, step by step, that people follow in order to deliver the outputs. And sometimes innovation can mean eliminating things. It's not always about creating something new. It's eliminating things that don't currently work as well.
That's really interesting, and I don't hear enough people talking about that. We tend not to stop a process or stop something that we've developed, and I think people find it very difficult in the public service to do that. Is to identify something and review it and think, well, this isn't working anymore, or this isn't up to scratch, and then stop it and develop something new. So that's really interesting. Does anybody else want to come in on that in terms of?
Breda, this is Paul here. Yeah, just to maybe add to what Sean said there, and to go back to something that David presented. I think one of the beauties about the scorecard that you've developed, right? Again, based on the solid foundation, but it's prioritized. It helps you to prioritize. So you do your assessment yourself with your team or whatever, and it gives you, I love the color code it gives. So for example, it might give you your orange or red on whatever, let's say strategic intelligence or whatever, or collaboration. You're not too sure, how do you do a good collaboration? So it helps you, for a simple, 10-minute, 15-minute investment of time, which isn't much, help you prioritize what are the key areas you need to look on for your business, because everybody is different. So I think that's a key advantage and very practical usefulness of the scorecard. And then, if you want to learn a bit more then about a particular area that you're weak on, well, you can read one of the guidance standards, you can talk to experts in the area or whatever, but it does help you prioritize and see where you're currently at. And then it also gives you ideas of how to get to the next level. Because if you're, let's say, at level 2 on whatever, let's say it's strategic intelligence or whatever, it gives you some guidelines about, okay, what does a 3 look like? What does a 4 look like? What does a 5 look like? It's very practical and simple and helps you prioritize. So in fairness to David and the group there, I think it's a fantastic tool.
That's a really interesting point, and just to reiterate the heat map that David showed, it's a great visual representation of all the really important components that together make up successful innovation management. And so once you fill out the scorecard questionnaire and you get your report, a really great detailed report, it shows you the areas by color coding, what things are going well, what you're doing well at, and what maybe needs a bit more work. And that's why I just mention again that it would be a fantastic precursor for public sector workers out there now to look at it in terms of doing this as a first step, a precursor to developing your innovation strategy. Breda, did you want to come in there as well on that point?
Yeah. I did just two things. The leadership, and thanks for that. I think there's absolutely phenomenal creativity and innovation across the public service. I mean, even if you think about the people around this table here alone, not to mind the audience, loads of us with marvelous ideas and great ways of wanting to do things. But what stops us? You know, and I mean, if you think about it, if we all look at our own organizations as public sector workers, you know, it's not that we lack innovation or creativity, but actually we just don't have the discipline to deliver it. So the great thing about this scorecard and these standards is that it gives the leadership of our organizations an opportunity to put in place a way for their people in their organizations, people like us, to actually deliver on some of that creativity. I mean, what a fantastic opportunity for us to deliver to the people we're serving, whether they're clients in Enterprise Ireland or IDA's cases, or whether they're the hospitals, or whether they're the schools, or whatever part of the public service it is. I mean, wouldn't that just be, that's like a massive step ahead to give people the freedom to apply the thinking that they have to make services and products better than they are now. I mean, improvement is what should it be all about. So I think really that particular standard for me is key, because it makes sure that the leadership gives us the space to do that. So I think it'll be a great opportunity for us as public servants.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Breda. And going back to another point that Sean made about safe space, I don't think we can underestimate that in terms of the public service. Amy Edmondson has written a book about the psychological safety of employees to be able to innovate. She's from Harvard, I think, if my memory serves, and it explores this really about allowing that safe space. And maybe Sean, you know, would you recommend trying something, but trying it in a smaller way, and that would provide the safe space, so the safe space for it to fail and not to work out, for instance, instead of going full hog with the full rollout, and then if it would be maybe a bit more of a disaster publicly.
Yeah, absolutely, Breda. The best advice at the moment, best practice, and it comes from McKinsey's, is a pilot, a small pilot. But the key thing is people got to understand that it's not, what we're doing on a small, we're doing an experiment. We want to test out the benefits before we actually release it fully into the marketplace. So you're doing a small set of experiments. That's the important thing. So in order to kind of, again, further mitigate the risks. And that would be a key part of the process and a key part of that framework. I'll keep emphasizing the framework because that is critical. And the leadership that needs to enable or authorize that framework, then within that, people can be creative and people can actually challenge and come up with significantly better ways of doing things. We've got the technology, it's finding the right problems to solve.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Does anybody else want to come in there? Yeah, I might move on to the next really significant, I guess, pillar of the framework is culture. And we ourselves in the public sector have over the last number of years really worked at deepening this innovation culture throughout the public service. Obviously, myself and the team that have been set up in the Department of Public Expenditure Reform, our role is to strengthen that and deepen that innovation culture. We've set up an innovation network that's incredibly active with over 800 members to date. We've launched various different initiatives such as the Innovation Fund, which we've spoken about, and also my colleagues Hilary Dolmen and Philip McGrath worked on various different learning and development interventions and so on. So we're really trying to deepen that innovation culture across the public service. So how important is culture? And I might just open the floor. What sort of culture do we need to foster innovation? And I'll ask if you can think about it in terms of the public sector. So it's predominantly who our audience is tonight. Mm-hmm. David, do you want to come in on that?
I don't mind starting.
Or Breda, yeah.
Go ahead, Breda.
I'll start off quickly, all right, before I start hogging the show. Sorry about that, everyone. But I think, you know, in the public service, I believe, having worked in it for most of my life, I think there's a lot of sort of constraints around us because, you know, our business is about serving the public, and it's taxpayers' money in effect that we're being used to deliver that service. So I think there's some very you know, tight constraints around how we spend that money, how we give grants to our client. Example, how, you know, how we spend the salaries to which we're paid through the public purse. So if you think of it like that, obviously we're then responding back to how we've spent money within the public service. So you might think that that kind of constrains creativity, or it would constrain risk taking, and maybe this sort of fear of failure, because we are by maybe the sheer nature of our culture quite constrained in that way. So this is where you were making, Breda, come to the fore, where like our culture needs to be, yes, we have to be careful how we manage ourselves, how we respond to the public service professional code of conduct we should be abiding by. But within that, you can still be creative. And I think to kind of create that mindset is really going to move us forward, and not have that fear of failure. Look, we've tried something, but, you know, it didn't work. But, you know, we've learned from that, and let's move on. Because if we're innovative ourselves, then the people, the services that we support will also in return be creative. So we kind of have to be leaders in that way and not be constrained by the fact we do work in a public service sector, really. So I think that's one thing, because it would be different from the private sector from that perspective. So I think it's for us ourselves to just be a bit brave and courageous, and not think that we have to, you know, that we can actually try things out, and it's going to benefit the people we serve.
And Breda, I would agree with you. Our video that we have for Innovation Week is about having the courage to innovate. And I guess another important factor in this is the diversity of the workforce, and not just in terms of, you know, ethnicity or whatever, and that's obviously very important, but diversity of thought. It's important that we make sure that there's not groupthink at our senior leaders and management boards and things of that nature, and that there's different people, different ages, different backgrounds, and different skill sets working together. Maybe David, did you want to come in on that? What kind of culture do you think we need to foster?
Well, I think, you know, if we had been talking about this 7 months ago, pre-COVID, we probably would have had a different conversation. But I mean, I think the culture we need is the one that we have now. You know, the amount of innovation that's been done right across the public sector in the past 7 months. Okay, it's been under a lot of stress with you know, the crisis that we've gone through. But if we can strip that element of it away and focus on what we've achieved, like, I think there's been a step change in the culture and what's possible. So I think what we need to do is really work to maintain that, to make sure that the barriers, you know, that perhaps were there before, we perceived them there before, perceived them to be there before, don't come back up. I mean, when you were introduced me, Breda, you talked about, you know, I'd been with Enterprise Ireland for just over 2 years, and before that I was in industry. And I remember when I was to become a public servant, I probably heard all the kind of the normal stuff of, you know, what do you want to go there for? You know, nothing that ever gets done, or, you know, all this stuff we kind of hear. I was amazed from the moment I joined the public service about the level of innovation going on, and I've been more amazed over the past 6 months. So it's really, for me, it's about harnessing that. It's about understanding that we can't affect culture on its own. We have to work on the leadership element. We have to work on the strategy element and all of the supports that go around it. So it's really taking this holistic approach to looking at innovation that's going to maintain that culture and enhance it over time.
And maybe, Sean, I might ask you about, you know, maybe in terms of the risk and looking at that, and having a diverse portfolio of innovation projects. How important is that for a public service context to maybe lessen the risk and but still experiment, to use your words?
Yeah, I would agree, and I've got to make a comment about culture as well, because I think one thing I always try and do, and okay, my experience would be more industry, but people are people at the end of the day. And really what I try and do is that when we're creating a better outcome, or we're dealing with a problem or something that's very frustrating with current processes for people, I try and ensure that one of the key outcomes is that we make a better experience for the people actually doing the job, because they have to have in it, because that's part of the mindset change that overall does get communicated and does start changing the culture. And I work with teams, and there's no perfect team. We'll have people sitting on the bench, we'll have people breaking down the bench in teams I work on, but you have to facilitate them, and you got to show them how this will deliver a better outcome for them in whatever task they have to do. So it is bringing people on the journey, everybody on the journey as well. So yes, that leads into the fact that we need a portfolio. And I'm very, very careful of not having too many initiatives, to be very honest with you, because people have, no matter what happens, they have a day-to-day task to do, to our job to be managed, or things to be done. And innovation tends to be on top of that. So I tend to look at one or two initiatives, one or two pilots that will create a quick win for them. There has to be a benefit in it for them too, because we have to change routines, we have to change habits and behaviors. And something, that's hard. That's hard. And when you get old like me, that gets harder, because what is it they say now, when you're 35, probably doesn't affect any of the rest of you, but affects me, your brain gets hardwired into routines. So I would have routines of how I do things. And if I have to change my routines, habits, and my behaviors, that needs to be designed into the solution as well. So a lot of complexity in how we do this, but a small portfolio, one or two initiatives, something that's going to deliver a win within 3 to 6 months, where there's a gain for the people actually involved. That's what leads to success for me. And then it's when you repeat that systematically, when you've got that framework, you've got that system in place, like the standard is about, and you're able to do this then in a year or two, repeatedly, every month, every quarter, that's when you deliver transformation. So it's a journey.
It is definitely a journey, and maybe not so linear as some might expect. Breda, did you want to come in there?
Yeah. No, it's just agreeing with that. I think it is a journey. And also, I think if we watch the way the culture operates in our organizations, and then if you have those small projects, and I agree with Sean on that, just a few small projects to kickstart something, the low-hanging fruit, we've all heard of that. But if you watch the way your own culture operates and move these new projects through using, because I think the worst thing ever is if you go at it hell for leather and then you find that it falls flat because you've not gone with what the organization's able to take at the time. So I think it's important to just read your own culture as best you can. Say, okay, well, I'll influence that person now and I'll move on there next, and have your own pathway for how these projects might be delivered. And one thing I've learned, and I'm sure, I hope a lot of you would agree, if in doubt, always ask the customer or the in doubt, go back to the person you serve. What would suit you, or what would work for you? It's a bit of Sean has a talk about design thinking, which is a big part of innovation, and getting people involved. I think that's absolutely key for projects to be successful. Thanks, Breda.
Absolutely, Breda. And we started off the week talking about human-centered design and also inclusive design, which is incredibly important to think of. And from the public service point of view, whether that's the EI client company, or whether that's the public service person operating the process, or indeed the public, very importantly, the citizen on the ground. Paul, did you want to come in there?
I'll just maybe one point about the whole fear of failure thing. I don't think it's necessarily just a public service, but obviously Breda made some very good points there about, hospitals, etc., very emotive and all that, whatever. But it's also the same in the private sector. So how do you go from fear of failure to kind of confidence? I think there's a couple of angles there. I think the management need to have an open door kind of policy, and so that's an important type of thing, so that people feel okay and able to suggest things. and then there's supporters to implement them if possible. Obviously, not everything can be done, but again, the framework helps with this kind of stuff. And then, we all, I think, get a bit of confidence by either getting some training or reading or whatever best practice, examples of best practices, using proven tools and methods. So, again, that consensus of hundreds of international experts that Sean talked about and myself through the ISO, that gives confidence both to the management that, okay, there is a process here. It's not just totally ad hoc. It's not Hail Mary type of stuff. We're going to do it in a systematic manner, and we'll have a portfolio approach, as Sean said. So it'll de-risk things. But then also the people who have to do the work are a bit more confidence themselves, because they can say, look, I'm building here on top of best practice, not just somebody's opinion in one consultancy or whatever.
Thanks, Paul. And I think it's really important to point out, and David did cover it, but in the report, which I have here, a draft of it, you can see that in the particular area, you'll get a score, and really importantly, actions to consider. So if, for example, maybe what transpires is that you need to do more work in terms of your resources or your skill gaps, you can look at a few different suggestions here about how to improve that particular part. So looking at back to that heat map of the house, if you can maybe bring up some of those scores over a few months by maybe taking some of these actions. I might next go on to another really significant part of the Innovation Management Standards Suite, and also obviously the scorecard, and that's collaboration. I think we know at this stage, innovation doesn't happen with just one person in a corner innovating all by themselves, and it takes teams and different voices, and we can actually build upon innovation and ideas. So how important is innovation and or collaboration to innovation? And how do we go about managing that collaboration? Who wants to jump in there? David, maybe?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, collaboration is incredibly important to innovation. Even, and Enterprise Ireland has made this a major focus area for a long time. We provide a lot of support to our clients, both kind of soft and hard on collaboration. And we are including the European funding models like Horizon 2020. But we also have extended that into newer offers like the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund that we run for our parent department. But it's interesting that, if we look at some of the software supports we have for innovation, like running clusters, we know that running these kind of networks where people can collaborate with each other and share ideas and learn together, that leads to harder types of collaboration. Whether it's through partnerships with third level research organizations, or with companies, multinationals and indigenous companies collaborating together through the Disruptive Technology Fund. So it's incredibly important. And even speaking to this particular project, we could ask, what does good collaboration look like? Well, it looks like three people who have been collaborating for 4 months who are still talking and have a really good at the end of it. I think that, if I speak honestly about this, there's parts of collaboration that are easy, because you often hear things that you don't agree with, but that are right. Sometimes those things are the hardest things to hear, but what they do is they ultimately result in something much better coming out the other side, much more effective. Absolutely, really, yes. I think the other thing is that this is definitely going to lead to further collaboration in this particular area between myself and Breda from IDA Ireland. We're already having conversations about this, and I suspect it'll probably do the same for ourselves and your team, Breda, over time as well, as we further develop on top of this.
What's been really interesting, just for those who just looking at the current reform program, which is called our Public Service 2020, and the OECD are actually reviewing that program at the moment. And what they've commented on so far in their early assessment is that the engagement across public sector organisations has been groundbreaking in terms of at the leaders with the Public Service Leadership Board down to the action teams. And a lot of public servants who took part in focus groups talked about how there was never an occasion to meet and connect with other public servants apart from your day-to-day job, or maybe in a crisis, whether it be Brexit or COVID now. But obviously we need to innovate outside of a crisis. And so I think it's really important that organisations think of ways to encourage within organisations to connect and find ways to allow people to connect and have conversations, and not just in the formal sort of work environment about a particular topic. Sean, did you want to come in there? Sorry, I think you had a hand up.
I was just going to comment as well about the collaboration. I think collaboration, I totally agree with Dave. We underestimate it. But I think collaboration in the sense, okay, let me give you kind of an idea. So we're doing something around innovation activity. And as a result, you've got a bunch of people there, and we've identified a couple of key elements: frustrations, problems, issues. But you know something, when we create a solution, this is the smart stuff. We can actually create a solution, but you may actually find when you talk to other departments and other teams, they will have a similar problem. So the one solution could be done as more what we call a platform that could be then used and leveraged and share the knowledge with other groups within, I'm not certain different departments, but you will find there's commonalities. We're finding it in industry, never mind where you are. I'm sure it's very similar.
Yeah, 100%, Sean.
Yeah.
And actually, this was explored a bit in our hackathon this week. One of the projects was about how 30% of the health sector staff don't have access to an email, and obviously there's a similar issue in terms of the local authority sector. Now, I know one of our innovation reps down in Limerick came up with a staff app to maintain communications during COVID, but I think we need to think about how some of these problems are quite similar. So obviously with the new climate action legislation and plan, there's a target there, and so all public service buildings and organisations will be thinking about how to reduce the carbon footprint and monitor more effectively energy. So whilst again local authorities are really quite advanced in this area, other organisations can learn from them. So there's definitely that scalability in terms of the issues, Sean. And Breda, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And just as a bit of feedback to everybody sitting around the room, I just want to kind of just make 2 points. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on in Ireland, and we should pride ourselves on, and we hear it all the time from companies that come in to locate here and invest here, they cannot get over the level of collaboration that happens. And it's all public sector. Now, in fairness, now the other client companies are great, but in Selling Ireland. So we go through Enterprise Ireland, Science Foundation Ireland, we go through the government system, our ministers. It's phenomenal the way this country pulls together in a real collaborative means to generate business and to get the economy going. So, I mean, that's a great, and I have loads and really a lot of clients say that to us, how really they can't believe that happens. And it was a real turning point for them in where they decided to locate in Europe in the end. So Ireland wins on that really collaborative effort. And the final point just on the collaboration says, when David and his team and myself and my team were working together on the development of the sort of IDA piece and EI piece and your own there, Breda, we had great fun. People forget all about that. I mean, we have to have some fun in all of this, and we had superb fun. And when I say that, I mean it in a very respectful way. But I mean, we had a laugh trying to do it. David would say one thing and say, "Oh, what are you talking about? That's rubbish. What about this?" And I mean, it was actually fun to collaborate. So, if we bring that back into it, the whole thing becomes less of a, I have to do this, and more of, well, actually, it's fun working with colleagues because they've great ideas, as David said, and Sean. You bring all those ideas together, and they make a great thing, great output.
And sometimes that healthy tension actually can provoke different ideas. For sure. In terms, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
On to Breda's, I think if the public sector only knew what the public sector knows, and exactly, if we when we get together, there's huge potential collaboration. I actually remember the OECD were in town there for the last while, and we had a couple of meetings, and we had lots of different agencies around the table, and see some great conversations. We probably should do it more proactively ourselves, rather than having the OECD to come. But like Breda says often, and lots of times we collaborate together, and we probably should try and even maybe schedule it even a bit more, because we're all so busy. But and then the other thing I like is evidence. There's great evidence, and actually was one of David's colleagues showed me a slide there a while back, Declan Black, of Enterprise Ireland, showing the collaborative effect of on how their clients perform. I think it was something like 70% plus 70% on a baseline of performance when they collaborate, either collaborate with another company, whether an SME or multinational, or they collaborate with a college on things like key metrics like sales, jobs, exports, etc. So, knowing that evidence as well is always a good, I think, incentive for people to, okay, how do we do this better and more, But I think we're very good at it. We probably should do more of it and schedule it maybe, because we're so busy.
And that leads me really nicely on, Paul, to the strategic intelligence portion of the scorecard. What do we mean by this, and how important is this? How do we get these insights? Where would you recommend a public servant who's just beginning their innovation journey to start in terms of insights, and how do we actually apply these insights that we find to our innovation development? Maybe David, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think Paul's kind of point was well put. We don't know what we know sometimes, and that's one of the reasons why a systematic approach to the strategic intelligence piece is so important. If we want to innovate with agility, we need to be able to make sense of the world around us. We need to have our strategic radar turned on, and the world is so noisy now. There's so much acceleration, so much new trends. How do you really effectively kind of connect with the things that are relevant to you, and then how do you use insights to kind of set direction and then execute, right? And if you can do that well, then you're innovating with agility. So having access to that information, being able to make sense of it in a systematic way is incredibly important. I mean, on our side, we're kind of looking at, well, some of our larger clients may be building this capability into their organization, but it's perhaps not scalable for a lot of our smaller clients. So is this an area that we perhaps need to step into and help and provide services around this to our clients? And that's something we're looking at as part of our innovation strategy. But it's incredibly important, and it all speaks to the same thing. And I'll speak about Enterprise Ireland clients here. For Enterprise Ireland clients to be sustained into the future, that they're probably going to have to do that through innovation, or at least a significant portion of innovation. And how do you win at that? Well, win at that by executing on an effective portfolio of innovation projects. How do you make sure you have an effective portfolio? Well, you make sure that it's informed by the right information at the right time. And for me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, really good point. And it's really not just private sector, and we really for public servants that are tuning in, it's so important for us to think about this. Citizens' expectations are changing. Their expectations are much higher. There is an expectation that everything will be online and everything will be immediate, and so we have to respond to that. In addition, we obviously have the big mega trends coming down the line. Climate change, digitalization, all of these other challenges that we face as a public service, and it's absolutely imperative that we build foresight and other tools into our strategic planning. Breda, did you want to come in there? In terms of applying insights.
Yeah, thanks, Breda. So what I've noticed over the time is the importance of sort of trying to capture all the intelligence that you have, and that people I've seen that have been very good. I'll take a simple example, actually. Project executives in IDA that would have secured big companies into Ireland, like IBM, say, or Intel. And the knowledge that they've developed over time of how they went about doing that sometimes is kind of taken for granted. And I think on an innovation journey, what I would have seen in organisations, and indeed in our own as public service, is how we do take things for granted and don't always have a means to capture all that piece that's maybe in people's heads. You know, I don't mean the nuts and bolts of things. I don't mean the numbers or that. I mean the way and the behaviour that we apply when we're trying to do our jobs. So I think this is a particular important part of the standards, because the framework around it gives us a sort of a helping hand on how we might capture that kind of information. And for me, I guess it's behaviours and knowledge you can't write down. It's sort of inherent in the way we do our business. And I think that's a real important part of the kind of strategic intelligence side of this standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, and I'm going to bring it down to a very base level as well, is it's actually people, I suppose, understanding how to listen. As Breda said there, some of the tacit knowledge about how things work and don't work. And so listening and observing are some of the key skills around identifying these insights. And the best people to do that are the people actually doing the work. They know the frustrations, the emotions, they know the problems day in, day out. And it's giving them the skills of how to document that so we can then take it to a higher level and start looking at, can we solve these problems? Are these problems actually worth solving? And then looking at that kind of process. So it's that kind of whole strategic intelligence is key. And then when you do create a solution, how do you anticipate the future needs of whoever it's going to be, who has that work to do in the future? How is that going to change? So we create a solution that also will have mileage, will continue for the next 5 years, possibly.
Thanks, Sean. I might now just, we're nearly out of time, but I might just bring in my colleague Vinnie Lanigan to see if there's an audience question we might be able to take just before. Great. Thanks, Vinnie. Do you maybe have a question from the audience that you can put to the panel before we finish up?
Yeah, we actually have loads of questions. I thought it was kind of rude that I would interrupt your great flow there. So I might capture two of them together that you might want to tackle. And it comes on from Paul's conversation about fear and risk appetite. So Marion O'Sullivan says, great discussion, and she just wanted to know what the panel's views were on risk appetite statements for organizations. And then along the theme of risk and risk appetite, Niamh asks, should I worry if my section scores low on the scorecard? And if so, are there resources available to maybe improve the score? So maybe signposting towards how you could improve the score.
So I might just answer quickly on the score, or maybe David, would you want to answer quickly on the resources and the actions to consider?
Yeah, I mean, the point of this is to help organizations identify where they are, and the tool has support resources designed to help you move the dial, as well as suggested actions for improvement. So I don't think there's any need to worry if you're low in a particular area or low overall score, because the tool is designed to help you move the dial on your. So I think any speak to our own clients that we've tested it with, they haven't felt in the experience of using the tool that there's an issue with the low score, as long as they feel that it's an honest reflection of where they are, which they have, and that the tool, through the experience it provides, gives you actions to consider and gives you support resources. So there's a route ahead in taking the next steps.
Absolutely, and I think also it provides you with an opportunity. If you're the senior innovation executive in your organization, you can then maybe use this as a way to maybe look at further developing the skills gaps, or maybe getting a dedicated budget for innovation. So it's it's a really, as Paul has said many times, it's really a strong, solid base on from that standard, suite of standards. So it's coming from a very strong base, evidence base there. So we've been talking about the various different components that make up this standard. Vinny, do you have another one there that you might want to pose to the panel?
Yeah, and then Antoinette just wants to know, is the scorecard useful for innovating in a process? And could the panel give an example maybe within the public service of a process that might be able to go through the scorecard?
So who wants to jump in there?
I know it's Friday and it's getting late and it might be hard to think of any examples.
Yeah. Can I pick up? I don't have an example, I must say, for the civil service, but I have an example, and it's for a booking engine for hotels. And it's a company in Galway. Booking engine that basically, if somebody wants a change on their website, they contact the company and the company sorts it out. And it's a process. It's a pure process, all done electronically, and it's actually making sure the response is done in a timely fashion. And innovation absolutely does work with a process, probably works better with a process, because traditionally we think about products, but a process is working out who are the key people involved, who are the key stakeholders, what needs to happen, and then to design a better outcome for everybody involved in the actual task. And it actually works incredibly well. And one other point that Vinny brought up the last time on the risk management, a good innovation framework will mitigate the risks as you go through it, because innovation, for the sense of it, it's the unknown. There's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, but as you work through the process step by step, you reduce those unknowns, so you mitigate the risks, because we got to give a confidence to the that we are not going to bring something to that they or instigate something that is actually going to put something else at risk or actually impacts on something else. So you do manage the risk as you work through it, as you work through the process as well.
Yeah, that's a really great answer.
Rita, I might have an example there. If you
Breda, Ella.
Yeah. Thank you. So part of my job was to develop the new products or new suite of grant aid for small to medium-sized companies in the IDA portfolio. And this is for all of the portfolio, not just for the companies I look after. And one thing we noticed was an awful lot of questions coming in from project executives about, well, where's the application form? And what do I say to the client? And sort of lots of questions around between the company applying for a grant, these particular ones, and to be drawn down. So what we did was we got a few of them together and said, what are the main things? We don't know what you do step A to Z with this particular grant. So we said, okay. So when we found out what the issue was from the people using the products with their clients, we drew out these maps. I know it sounds very, very basic, but the solution, often can be. So we drew out from A to Z of how the product is taken up. So you have a conversation with a client, 1. 2, you give them a brochure. 3, you show them a link to the application form, and so on, so on, so on. And we did this exercise for all of the products that we've designed for our clients. And then we went back to the project executives and said, look, now, do you know how to use these products now? And the take-up has been phenomenal. We could see an increase year on year of take-up of these products by our clients. So that, I hope, is a helpful kind of example. It's an internal one to us, but obviously we were just not clear enough about how these products should be positioned with clients.
That was so helpful. David, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I you've heard me talk about this one before, and I'm speaking of this as a citizen, I guess, into a number of public service process innovations that I've seen. So one of them, and the one that I like most, I'm a big fan of, is the new passport application process, which is just, night and day compared to where it was. So fair play to the Department of Foreign Affairs. It's fantastic. And the second one would be, trying to think of things that we would all use as citizens rather just as public servants, would be the my account area that revenue set up, and that's evolved. But it's continuing to evolve. The whole experience now of getting in there is just fantastic. They've really done an amazing job with that, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And then I know our OGCIO colleagues are working on a digital post box, which I think, to be honest, will be revolutionary for the citizen. Paul, did you want to jump in there as well?
Just quickly, I think there's a question about the risk side of things. There are, again, frameworks for how do you mitigate and manage risk. And if the person's interested, ISO 31000 series, 31000 looks at how do you do that. And then that's kind of horizontal across any sector generically. Kind of like the simple approach that Breda talked about, but I suppose a bit more of a framework around it. And then in medical devices, there's other ones you can Google, but for specific verticals, how you take the general and apply it to maybe more specific verticals, like medical, for example. But then I suppose just one of the final one about, the risk of, not doing things systematically is you do them ad hoc or you do them very directed. And neither is very good. I think if it's ad hoc, the performance isn't going to be always there. Maybe you'll get one or two lucky breaks. Or if it's very directed and this is how we're going to do things and it's my highway, that's not going to work very well. So one of our colleagues on the National Innovation Management Committee, Charlie from Belfast actually, has this nice chart about that, showing performance on the vertical axis of innovation and constraints on the horizontal axis, and he's got the showing this kind of an optimum where it's a framework, loose enough framework, not too loose, not too rigid. That gives you your optimum performance. So I think the opposite of the risk is not taking the I think if you balance it like that, you can get a good outcome, I suppose, consistently, hopefully. And it's just a system to help, and the scorecard really does add a huge amount on top.
And Paul, that's a really good point, and great plug there for other things that NSCI are up to in terms of risk. The other thing I was just going to say, Breda, you mentioned then the customer journey mapping, and I think that's really important and something everyone can do very simply. Put up some large pages on your wall and work out the whole journey and where are the pain points, and how do you know the pain points, who are the people delivering the process, who are the people receiving the process, and ask them what their experiences are. Now we've run way over time purely because I have no concept of time, and this is also a passion project of mine, but I just wanted to sum up what this scorecard is all about, and really invested in. I really believe that this will be really helpful for public service leaders, whether they be in strategic HR or our specific innovation executives throughout the public service innovation reps and so on. So maybe David, can you tell us when will this be available to people and where can they find it?
Oh, you saved that question right for the end then, Breda, did you? So the good, I came prepared, it's okay. The good news is that this tool is now complete and is ready to deploy. So the next step for us is to train some people in the Public Service Innovation team, hopefully next week. And then they have a number of methods they can use to deploy it. So I would expect that you'll start to see some communication on it from your team either next week or very early the week after.
Okay, excellent. And so obviously there are three tools, one for IDA clients, one for EI clients, and one for public service. And our individual teams have worked to develop and bespoke versions of those in terms of the language to make it more appropriate and fitting for our relevant audiences. And that's what we've been collaborating on. And so we're delighted that will be coming on stream. It'll be on the public service one will be on our website, ops2020.gov.ie/innovation. On our Innovation Hub page, you'll be able to find it there or a link to it. So now I just want to thank our great panelists. I could talk to you all day. It's been really informative. So David Keeley, again, thank you from Enterprise Ireland. Breda O'Toole from IDA Ireland. Paul Killeen from the National Standards Authority of Ireland, and Sean McNulty from Dolmen Design and Innovation. Thank you so much. And again, a big shout out to my own team, Vinnie Lanigan and Catherine Matters in particular, for the phenomenal work of Innovation Week. I'm going to be off next week, David, so you don't need to send that that email to me about training. I'm gonna lie down. We're delighted with the engagement of the week. Well over 4,000 people engaged in our central program, so we're more than happy. And really thank you to the audience for tuning in at the different events every day. From my perspective, thank you for the ongoing support of Laura Mahoney, my boss, and Dr. Lucy Fallon-Byrne, who heads up reform in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And that's it. We're at the end. So thanks again, and see you next year.